All right, class. Want to talk to you about your assignment this week again, chapter 2 on culture, and I want to focus for your exercise this and discussion this week. We're going to be looking at the concept of culture shock, and if you read the chapter, you know the culture shock is the experience we have when we feel that we feel anxiety because we don't know what's expected of us in a different cultural setting. So, for example, if we fly to a country in Europe and we've never been to, let's say, to England or to France, and you get off the plane, you're walking through the airport or you're going out into the streets, all of a sudden you feel culture shock because you don't really know. The reason why we experience it is we don't know what's expected of us in a different culture, because we may know that they have different ways of doing things, first of all, different language, possibly, but then the cultural expectations of how we're supposed to behave in many different situations in that culture may be different from the way we were taught in our home culture. So in our home culture, we feel the most comfortable because we've been enculturated into that culture and we know what's expected. But if we go to a different culture, we won't have that shield. We won't have that common sense, so to speak, to take for granted. And so we can't take anything for granted. And so we feel a sense of anxiety. Culture shock is a sense of anxiety of not knowing how to behave or how to dress or in any other different types of cultural expectations. So as you read the reading by Chagnon, the cultural anthropologist who did the study with the Yanomamo tribe in South America, and you read there that when he went to visit for the first time the Yanomamo, he experienced, for quite a while, a lot of cultural shock because basically he didn't do his homework. He didn't review the literature. He sort of had taken it for granted that most tribal societies are very peaceful people, not highly competitive. And what he found out, because he was the first anthropologist, as you read, to visit the Yanomamo, the first white man to visit their culture. And what he came to find out was that the males were highly warlike, and they were highly competitive with each other. And so when he got there, he was shocked by that, and culture shock. And so he didn't know how to respond. And so when they would play tricks on him, steal items from his tent, for example, he would act very humble about it and try to ask for things back. And he was displaying himself as not being a real Yanomamo, right? So they thought he was a weakling, and so they really took advantage of him. And until he finally lost his temper one time, and they stole his shotgun, and so he went during the night and stole a couple of their canoes, took them up the river, and had them put away. But he stayed up all night in anxiety, knowing that when they found out that he had taken their canoes, that way they would probably kill him. So he was expecting to die. So that's sort of an ultimate cultural shock to face that. And but the next morning when they found out that he had taken their canoes, they felt that he was finally coming around, that he was now acting like a real Yanomamo, that he was now more of a real human being than what he was before. And so it was a long learning curve for him. So culture shock is that experience, again, that we feel when we're in a different cultural context and we don't really know how to behave. And usually, if we stay long enough, with that cultural context, we'll begin to learn their ways, and so that over time the cultural shock tends to lessen. So now, also remember, and as you do this exercise, that certainly you can talk about going to different cultures, your own experiences, but it doesn't have to be just like going to some foreign culture somewhere or in the world, but it can also be, right next door in the next neighborhood. So if you think about cultural differences, like class cultural differences, if you go into a poor neighborhood, how people act and feel and do everyday activities, you're going to feel culture shock. How they speak, their dialect, this kind of thing. Or it might be a different ethnic community, and you don't have to travel so far, and you will experience culture shock. And so it doesn't have to be some far off place. It can be just up the road from you, right? Moving from this, like I did, from the south to the north, I experienced some culture shock because people didn't talk the same. People weren't socially as friendly as Southerners tend to be, and it took a while to get acclimated to that environment. And same and vice versa. You talk to Northern students that come south, they experience culture shock here as well. So try to come up with what I'm going to ask you for doing your discussion exercise with me is to each of you come up with 2 different experiences you've had of culture shock. I'm certain you've had more than 2, but come up with 2 what you think are very interesting experiences. And what I want you to do then is we'll share your 2 in our discussions, and from there, then you can talk with each other and discuss your experiences and how the second part of it is were you able to overcome your culture shock in that situation, and how did you overcome your culture shock? Just like Chagnon in the article, how he talks about his overcoming the culture shock. So, sometimes people overcome it by simply leaving the cultural different context that they're in. They get away from it. And as many other readings in our reader deal with culture shock, like the cultural anthropologist that studies the street gangs, right? The prostitution ring on the streets and how they got in, how the cultural shock they experienced, and how they adapted to that. To be a good cultural anthropologist, you have to be able to withstand cultural shock and to find creative, adaptive ways to overcome it so that one can do one's study. So that said, then for Friday this week, I want you to go ahead and have your examples up, and then what we'll do is have a discussion among yourselves, and then I'll have some comments afterwards of your experiences, and let's see what we come up with. I think it'll be very interesting to see the diversity of experiences with culture shock. Okay, so for now, I'm gonna see you again soon, and I look forward to your experiences. All righty, talk to you later.